it makes a little bit more sense when I play the full track with just these animals. with just these with just these instruments. Hi and welcome to a new video. So instead of just uploading an entire 2.5 hour live stream, I decided to do a little bit of a shorter video, but cramming as much information as possible into it. So in this live stream, we were focusing on composing the ending part of a trailer track. And besides that, if you want to check out the full live stream, just head down to the video description and check out my Twitch channel. So I hope you enjoy. So just before we get into the track, I just wanted to let you know that if you are supporting me on Patreon, you will get the full access to the production stems and the MIDI files and the final mix for studying purposes. But now enough talking, let's get into it. Okay, so let's dive into the track itself by showing you the arrangement, all the sample libraries, the plugins I have used, and also what I did for mixing and mastering. Okay, so first channel, I used the Nucleus strings, the full ensemble spiccato samples here, and it sounds like this. Okay, so it may appear a little bit funny that I just used these single arpeggio lines for this track and not a full-blown, string arrangement. The thing is that there's so much going on inside that track that I just wanted to put a little bit of a string pattern on top and not just make this track being a full orchestral arrangement, because we are having so much stuff in here, even though there is not that much tracks going on, but we have so much powerful and heavy sounds going on in that track. I try to avoid everything which is sort of unnecessary. So don't get me wrong here. I don't think that an entire orchestra is unnecessary, but just in terms of creating a hybrid track, we have to make sure to understand that this is not orchestral focused or rock focused or something. So it's a hybrid track consisting of several instruments, and that's why it's important to not think like a full ensemble, but just making use of all the instrumentations to get your track done. Okay, so next up would be brass, and these are the Junk XL trombones, and I used a combination of sustain, marcato, and staccatissimo samples layered all on top of each other. And the used microphone settings is just the Alan Meyerson Junk XL tree microphone. So let's listen how the trombones sound. Okay, so next one would be the French horn. These are also the same microphone settings and the same setup for the articulations. This is sustain, marcato shorts, and staccatissimo again. So let's listen to the horns. So let's get into the percussions for a second here. I am using the Decimator drums here by Audio Imperia. And just to avoid confusion, Decimator drums has been discontinued in a sense. It is now part of the Cerberus sample library by Audio Imperia too. So let's listen to the percussions. So it doesn't really need a music expert to know that this setup so far is very rudimentary, very basic, very simple. If we just listen to the strings and the brass and the percussion so far, it is a very basic setup, but this was done on purpose. The simple reason is I don't want a track to be focused towards science fiction or adventure or fantasy, whatever. I just want to have it almost generic so that it can be used in as many trailers as possible. So let's check how all these three things sound together, and then we head over to the electronic stuff, the additional trailer elements, and the choirs. Okay, next track would be, I didn't even name it right, would be the sub-pulses of Devastator. And I just use it to enrich the low frequencies, to just add a little bit of more oomph to the whole track and support the orchestra elements and the percussions. And it sounds like this. And so on. We don't need to hear the full thing, but let's just do a little comparison between the elements we talked about so far and in combination with these sub-pulses. Without. So you already can hear that it's not really necessary to have low strings going on or other instruments adding lower frequencies. It's just important to have a good foundation of a bass instrument. So right at the very end, we have the soft Brahms by Devastator again, and they sound like this. It's just the ending chord here. So let's talk about the choirs. And the used library here is Storm Choir Ultimate by Stretch of Samples. And they sound like this. So one thing to notice is that I can't get higher than the C5 here. So I tried to add this lower F here to make it a little bit bigger towards the end and support the rest with instruments. Okay, so what is also very important to keep in mind is that if you write choir-focused trailer music, that you always have the ability to simply render out a different version of the track, giving cutters and trailer editors the option of having a non-choir version available of your track. This is very important because most of the time the non-choir version will be used way more often than the full version. Next instrument would be the Devastator trailer drums. It's kind of a mixture of hits and drums. And if I play this to you for a second here. So it's clearly hits, but if you just listen to this for a second together with the decimator drums here, you get a better idea. So it's just a nice addition to the actual drum set. So let's combine the remaining instruments here for a second. And I've used the Devastator acoustic hits from the same library. I've used the long risers and the downers, the classic downers. And again, I didn't rename these tracks here. This is actually one downer patch of one of my libraries, tonal downers. And there's another one here by Devastator again, which is signature hits and tonal elements, the signals by Audio Imperia. This is actually from the library artifact Reanimate. So let's listen to these channels here combined, and it makes a little bit more sense to hear them all at once rather than just a riser, a downer, or a hit. Okay, so I think we can jump in here. Let's check the middle section. Okay, so let's get to the mixing side of things. And as you can see here, so you're not getting confused too much, my mixing console is split into two sections. There is the left section, which basically contains all the used instruments. So please keep in mind, I set my mixing console to show data only. So you can just see the tracks which actually contain data. And there is also a right area here where you can see all of the group tracks or group buses I routed the instruments to. I split this up, and you can do this here, by the way. When you click that little button and you scroll down, you can see that you can attach whatever you want to the right side of the mixing console, or even leave it on the middle or on the left area of the mixing console. So I just did this to organize my mixing template a little bit better. So as you can see, Mixing wise, there is not a lot going on. You see some moved faders here, and there's actually a little bit of reverb on this track here. Let me play this for a second. This is, I used some Valhalla Shimmer for this one. So let me turn this off for a second, and I just want to have it actually a little bit more mighty and more floating, so I just put this shimmer on it. Next up, there is another channel here. I think this is the last. I wanted to have this mean kind of door scratching sound or whatever. So if I deactivate these plugins here, this is the original sound. So I put a little bit of this waves distortion to it. It sounds like this. And then I actually didn't want to have it any longer than this, but I put the reverb on it to give it a little bit more of a, let's say, a fade out. Okay, so let's get to the stem section here, or to the group bus section, and there is a little bit more going on here. So let's take care of the strings first, and you can hear that there is a little bit compression going on and this air EQ. So if I turn this off, so all I did was compress the strings a little bit and add a little bit of that shimmer on top. And next up is the Seventh Heaven reverb. I used the Boston Hall B for this to add a little bit of a simply add a little bit of a nice reverb tail. Almost the same is going on for the brass. So again, we have quite some compression going on. But that's about it. So I find it very important to compress orchestral instruments, especially when it comes to hybrid tracks, because you need them to punch a little bit through all the other instruments. Also, I have a little bit of reverb going on here, which is the Sanders Hall of the Seventh Heaven reverb. So again, just a nice little tail. Okay, so the next thing going on here on the percussion stem, let me just play this back for you. The only thing I have on here is a little bit of infinity EQ. I can turn this off for a second. And you can hear that it sounds really dull and way too much low stuff going on. And also I did a sharp cut at around 20, let's say, like, what is it here? 30, 35 hertz. Followed by this, we also again have a little bit of compression going on. And also a little bit of that shimmer on top, because I want to have the percussions really get through the mix and really add a little bit of that, you know, let's say this shimmering upper part of the frequencies. Okay, so next up we have the choirs. If you listen to this, there's also quite a bit EQing going on. As you can see, I cut away everything below roughly like 200 hertz. Let me turn this off. This is how the choir sounds. And it's more of a natural sound, but I want to have it really trailerish, you know, cutting through and getting rid a lot of the mid frequencies to create space for other instruments. And adding a lot of heights, again, a lot of high frequencies to really cut through the mix. So then again, we have some compression going on. And next up again, a really long reverb set to like 5.4 seconds. This is the West Church preset here. So especially when it comes to choirs which sing in syllables, I prefer to really drown them, to overcompress, almost overcompress them and drown them in reverb. And this is how I find they sound kind of realistic when you add them to the rest of the track. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about the mastering. And since my vocals are being routed through Cubase, I just want to talk about the plugins first and then activate or deactivate them one after another so you get an idea what's going on. Okay, so the first plugin in Chain is a simple EQ here, and I cut everything below 20 Hertz away so you don't have any rumbling or annoying low noises going on. Next up would be a multiband compressor. I just use this to toast together all of the individual group tracks. And next up is another compressor, and both of these compressors I dial a little bit back, so we're not working, let's say, not working at 100%, or as I would typically work with if I would just use one compressor. I just dial them back a little bit and let each of these do their magic. So I use the Drummer S73 for this. Next up in Chain, and I'm not ashamed to say this, I always dial in Neutron 3 into my mixes to see how I can improve, what can I do better, what suggestions the track assistants are giving me, and in general just a tool to learn when I'm mixing my track. If I like it, I keep some of it. I try to tweak it a little bit, of course, and as you can see here, I'm not using full 100% of each of these settings. Some are turned off, like the exciter here at the very end, and they are just dialed in like, let's say 55%, and this one is like 60%, but it's just helpful to have. Next up in line is OTT, which is basically another compressor, but I really love that one because it has a very special own character. I just dial it in at like 7% of depth, and the in-gain, so it's just like 0.7 dB, so it's not really doing that much. The only thing additionally happening is that I introduce a little bit of some high frequencies, gain up the low frequencies a little bit, and dial back a little bit on the middle frequencies. Next up would be my limiter in Chain. It's the Invisible Limiter by AOM, and last but not least, we have this Sonox Oxford Inflator. And this is just kind of a overtone distortion plugin, which gives you a little bit more gain or punch on your track. So in this view, I just lined them all up again. The EQ here, Dynamic Spectrum Mapper, Multiband Compressor here, then the Drummer here. Then the next plugin in line would be the Neutron 3. Then here you can see the OTT and the limiter here, and the last in Chain would be the Oxford Inflator. So we'll just play back the track and put them on and off one after another so you can hear what they're doing inside the track. So finally, I will just turn them all off so you can hear what the track sounds without mastering at all. And then for the last time, I will just turn them all on again to give you an idea. Okay, so I really hope you enjoyed this little tutorial. If you are interested to follow me during a live composing process on Twitch, you find the link below in the video description. And as I said before, if you're supporting me on Patreon, you will get access to the production stems, the final mix, and the MIDI files for studying purposes. Of course, the following should be pretty obvious, but I just have to mention it once. You're not allowed to reuse these stems or the final mix for your own productions and resell that music. If you have any questions, suggestions, constructive criticism, please make sure to leave them all down in the comments below. Of course, I would be happy if you subscribe to my channel or give me a thumbs up, leave a comment for this video, and I hope you liked it. Take care wherever you are and see you next time. Bye.